You are live. Yeah.
All right.
This program also lets us do these banners. And so let's see. Edit. And also, when we do like question and answer stuff at the end, I'll be able to let comments and questions scroll or like come up on the screen so we can talk about them. Welcome
Cool.
to Take a Seat Live with Ryan Poole. Okay, let's see how this goes. All right, show. Let's go. And what if I want to edit that to not scroll? Welcome. Yeah. There we go. Somebody mentioned to me, they're like, I don't know how you have a conversation, facilitate the conversation, run the chat, do the back end. It's like, hey, bro, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's too much for one person, but when you're starting out, that's what you got to do.
Right. Got
We,
to.
with my old podcast, I had to be the sound guy and a host and set up, same deal. We did eventually, we had an intern for like 5 episodes, and then that was nice. We actually had somebody like, hey, you press these buttons so I don't have to run out of the room.
Right.
But yeah, that was fun. You need an intern.
That sounds so weird to have an intern.
I
Yeah,
know.
I might. Let's see. Is it saying I'm live on Facebook right now? Actually, I may not even be able to see that.
Yeah, I'm looking at your Facebook page and I don't see it yet.
Let's see. But it is definitely coming in as I'm logged in as a comment. Do you mean my personal Facebook page or my business
Personal.
Facebook? It wouldn't say it on my personal, but I'm trying to figure out how
Ah.
to get it to do it on. So 'cause I'd have to share it. Let's see if I can just search myself.
Oh yeah, here it is. It's on your other page.
Cool, because I couldn't see if I click it now.
Cool. And now I shared it.
You shared it? Okay.
Yeah, it's on your consultant page.
I may just go share it from you because I think it's being weird because I am both people. So like when I go to my consulting page, it forces me to act as Remington the consultant
Remington.
instead
Yeah, I
of
know what you
I
mean.
just changed it. Here we go. Boom. Oh, we working the system on these hoes. All right, share. Let's go. Let's go. Share here. Uh-huh. And I'm gonna share. Oh, you can share a live to your story. Okay, let's see how that's gonna work. Never done that before. Okay, get frisky with it. Facebook. Cool. All right, so I just shared it twice. Pool. I be on here like let me tell the story. I'm somebody's producer. The way I be learning this stuff, I be learning it on the fly. I was doing when I found that scroll thing in the comments. I was like, "Hey, y'all, we produced out here. We're produced."
Yeah, I love the banner.
Oh,
Or I don't know, do you call it a banner? Like, or the whole background, how we're like in a
the
thing? It makes it look
like
so official. Yeah.
a stream layout.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
that's
was
super
one of the
cool.
things that I really wanted. Like I was telling my social media guy Jared, I was like, it was really my main reason. One of my main reasons for wanting to do this show is because I wanted a stream layout, and so I was like,
So you needed a
I'll
show to
figure
go
out
with it.
some. Yeah, I needed a show to go with the stream layout. So here we are. You know. All right, we'll give people some time to come in. I've never done a midday live before, so we'll see what happens. Edit. What time?
Question, is it
Yeah,
do you
go
mind
ahead.
if I vape?
I don't care.
Okay, cool.
You do what you do. Yeah. I want people to be their white selves on my show.
You think vaping's white?
Uh, it's,
Your all day black.
pretty white. It's pretty white. But I
Some of
mean,
my
you
hip
know,
hop clients vape,
yeah.
although
I
they're
mean,
usually they're probably vaping something else.
something else, exactly.
Oh, but for sure, I have one hip hop client who vapes nicotine, just
There,
like me.
the first the first time I was introduced to vaping, it was before vaping was vaping, and it was not nicotine. So I would,
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I think it just depends. To be honest, share to your story. Cool. It's now live. Yes, I am. Okay. Cool beans. So, all right. I think we're just gonna go ahead and get started. Oh, this is also recorded, so that'll be good. All right. So, welcome everyone to Take a Seat Race Talks with Remington Holt. And my guest today is Ryan Poole, who is a music producer and a friend of mine. He's here stationed in Nashville. And as we know, the role of Take a Seat Race Talks is to help build white allies who will act in my interest in my absence. For folks who know me or follow my work, you know that I am a DEI strategist and consultant for schools in particular, but I also be consulting with everybody. And so just around race and culture and one of my passions is helping white people to see the world through a different lens. And so I've cultivated a lot of relationships in the past where, it's just a thing that me and my white friends talk about race. And a lot of them tell me that they don't have these conversations with a lot of other people. And so I felt like it'd be a good idea to put it on a platform and just so people can come in and participate and ask questions and just hear the conversation. So that is what we are here to do today. Ryan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Ryan Poole. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I produce music for a living, but originally from San Diego, California.
Mm,
And I've been here in Nashville for Oh yeah, it's real uppity. And I've been
mm.
here in Nashville for 9 years. Mostly, I did move back home for a minute, and I came back. And yeah, I spend my days helping people to make their music good, essentially.
Yeah, I go to Ryan's studio from time to time. I love it has so much like character. Ryan's just such an interesting person. And so hopefully you all get to learn more about him. I got some questions and we're gonna have a little conversation today. One thing I do want to ask of people is if you are in the live right now on Facebook or on LinkedIn, that you would go ahead and share us out. So people can come and find us and catch some of this good knowledge. We'll be around until about 2 o'clock, 1:45, 2 o'clock, something like that. So feel free to share. And also we have a question and answer segment at the end where we will answer questions about our conversation or things that you come up with, things that you think of. So put those in the chat or post them as a comment if you're on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you are, and we'll be able to display those questions at the end and give them some answers, hopefully, at least speak to the things that you're wondering about. So we are going to hop straight in. Ryan, so like, gosh, have I ever called you Ryan? I always call him Poole. So
Oh yeah,
I may just switch back and forth.
yeah. You can call me
So
whatever you
you know,
want.
so, Poole, we've known each other for a few years now, and we've had a lot of great conversations about the topic of race. And one thing that I always say about you is that you're such an old black uncle. Ryan smokes Black and Miles. He drives an old Mercedes Benz. He keeps a bunch of old relics in his studio. So he's pretty much just a black uncle. He also Jimmy rigged his microphone to work for this situation, and so he's giving us real black uncle vibes, and I appreciate it. So talk to me about like where you grew up and how you grew up, who you grew up with, etc. Like what makes you the Poole that I know inside this white body?
Um, man, I probably get those tendencies from my dad.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I grew up in San Diego, like I said, and I've got an interesting background in the sense that I've got kind of two ways I grew up. Well,
Mhm.
so my parents were like pretty solidly like middle class, I would say. And then they
Mhm.
got divorced when I was like 5 or 6. And so
Mhm.
each one of them kind of became poor for a while. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? And so like without two incomes and struggling that way. I don't know. Maybe they weren't poor. Maybe I'm putting words in their mouth, but like
Mhm.
we moved from like a house to apartments.
Mhm.
And meanwhile, there's some members of my family who are more wealthy. And so I've had this interesting growing up experience where the where I grew up, you know, we grew up in like a pretty not affluent area, but like a very middle class, nice area.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's most of the people I grew up with. But I always kind of felt like we weren't poor, but we were on like kind of the lower side, like apartment living and all of that. And there was a time, my parents, things went up and down. So at one point in
Mhm.
time, we were doing like free lunches at school and that kind of stuff. So I kind of got that vibe. But then also like there's other members of my family who gave us experiences that really only like wealthy kids get to have. And I've had some
Mhm.
really privileged experiences in my life too. And I've had times of feeling like I was an outcast amongst the wealthy, being in
Mhm.
groups of people that were very, very wealthy and feeling like you guys are weird or different. But also times where I didn't feel like I necessarily fit in with like kids that were in poverty because I had these experiences that they didn't necessarily had. So I don't know.
Mm.
I guess I've always felt like I was never exactly like a solid part of anybody's group, but I've always been a little bit a part of everybody's group.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I have when I was a kid, I was really into nerdy stuff for a while. I was just like into academics, and so I was with a group of nerd friends we were all in the academic bowl where you was like Jeopardy and you had a little ringer, and
Uh-huh.
who wrote Wuthering Heights? Barrett, Emily Bronte, like that was
Did you
I
answer it
was
that emphatically?
oh hell yeah, probably more emphatically as a kid. And but then again, I also was into music. Um, and once I got into music and I got into a band in high school and started taking that serious, I was in a
Mm.
band with these guys who were like wrestlers. They were all like jocks,
Okay.
which is usually jocks don't do music you don't think of, but they
Uh-huh.
did. And
Okay.
so I kind of completely switched social groups, but I don't know. Over the years, I like everybody. And so I've spent a lot of time with everybody. One thing you'll find out if you try to be friends with everybody is that everybody doesn't all agree with each other.
Mhm.
And, so you go with group A, some of the things they're talking about and the ways that they view the world and they think about things, it's a little different than group B. And maybe group A
Mhm.
doesn't even like group B, but you're like,
Mhm.
wait a minute, I like both of these groups. I like group A and group B. And so I've learned to, I don't know, figure out how to kind of be friends with everybody, but um yeah, the end.
Yeah. The end. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess I did know, like, we've talked before about your parents' divorce and, like, but still having, I think it's like wealthy, like grandparents or aunts or something like that, and that kind of coloring your experience. But I don't know, for some reason in this moment, it is making a lot of sense the way that you can kind of chameleon through all of these different groups because you do have this really diverse life perspective. And I feel like, you're a person who is open to, like you said, group A and group B. It's like, I like both of these people. Like, I may not like put them in the same place together, but like, and when
Oh
I'm
yeah.
with group A, I'm with group A. And when I'm with group B, I'm with group B. And so I think it's a good attribute
Yeah.
of someone who is poised for allyship. That's cool.
Well, and not to be too overly therapy hour, but welcome to the therapy hour. But
Hey, nothing wrong with
yeah.
it.
But I do think that divorced parents will do that. I don't know if that does that for everybody, but for me
Hmm.
for sure. My parents had a really ugly divorce and like they both
Hmm.
had a lot against each other. And so growing up, you know, split custody, you go to dad's house and, you know, he kind of talks shit about my mom. At the same time, my dad was always he was always real good about being like, I know she's your mother. You should love her. She loves you. She's a good mom. You need her. But like, here's some shit. And then my mom's kind of the same way, except she was a little more vindictive. It wasn't like he's a good dad. It was like, here's some shit. And so you're with your parents and they're both shit talking each other.
Yeah.
But like as a kid, it's like you love them both. And so I had to get used to the fact that their narrative, let's say if you completely believe mom's story, you know,
then
or if you
dad's
completely
terrible.
believes dad's story, yeah, they're terrible and you can't. Meanwhile, you have to spend the weekends with them. So, you know, so when two adults don't like each other and don't get along, you know what I mean? Like if you're the kid in the middle now, if you're an adult, you could just join a side and be like, cool, this guy's right. And you know what I mean? I don't need to spend time with him anymore. What a dick. But when you've got, when you're a kid in the middle, you have to somehow love both your parents and go through life anyway. So I learned to realize to put stuff into baskets that like, okay, you say this about them. There's probably some truth to that, but also that's not the full picture because he took me to Disneyland. He's pretty great. You know what I
mean? That is so like, that is a really good point. And I really kind of identify with that feeling like I'm on both sides. Like as a Black practitioner of anti-racism, a lot of my Black friends and colleagues are like, woo, child, I couldn't do this with these white people. How do you do it with the white people? But like, not only do I just work with white people, I have a genuine love for white people. And I think like when I think about when being in school, like my middle ground situation was I was very smart and always at the top of my class, every grade. And because of tracking, that meant I was in class with mostly white kids. But then I also was able to see how other Black kids from different places or in different socioeconomic realms within my same school, they were not treated like me. So when I talked to them, I was having this empathy and hearing this story about school that was not true for me, but I saw it happen to them. So I know it's true for them. So it's like, I've got to hold these two things in tension and figure out how do I want to move, knowing that there's two sides of the story. And I don't know, I've just never thought about it so directly. That is a really good point, because I feel like when I go to these different schools and when I'm usually with majority white schools, I'm able to hear like, yes, I'm privileged and I have issues, or yes, I've been teaching for X number of years and I recognize that I've been teaching like a white person teaching to white people for X number of years. So like, I'm not as quick to just be like, oh, it's too white up in here, I'm out. It's like I have room, I have cultivated capacity to be able to hold both things. And so I think that's a really good way to put it. And I'm learning something about myself. This show ain't just for y'all white folks. We doing it. And so I want to hop to like kind of my next question. I ask all of my guests this. So like one of my majors in college was child development. And so a lot of human development and psychology, we talk about people's socialization, how they grew up, what were family dynamics, where did you live, what was your religion, all this stuff creates your socialization. It's the experiences that shaped you into who you are today. But like, I've kind of turned this question on its head for my purposes, and I want to ask you, like, what was your racialization story? Like, what messages did you receive, implicit or explicit, about people who were not white when you were growing up? And like, that could have been from television. And like, some people have talked about how, well, there were no Black people around me, so I received implicitly this message that either they don't exist, or they only exist on TV, or they don't matter. So like, just thinking about stuff like that, what would you say was your racialization story, whether it was given to you or whether it was just taken in from your environment?
I always, man, for whatever reason, right before I'm about to talk, I'll take a little vape and have a dramatic puff. You know what I mean? Like, ooh, we got to listen to what he's about to say.
I mean, you are a music producer, so yeah, you're dramatic. I get it.
It's true. Man, okay, so I was thinking about this. I mean, I've had a long life to this point in ways, so I don't. There's probably a lot of different touching points.
Mhm.
I'm real old, but I would say, as a kid, what's interesting is that um, where I grew up, there was not very many black people at
Uh-oh,
all.
hold on. We cutting out just a little connection. Wi-Fi
Ooh,
on, plugging into a router. Hold on just a second.
yeah, no worries.
Having some technical difficulties, folks. I don't
I may not have the best Wi-Fi. Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me now?
Boom. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see if it holds up.
Okay, so last thing I heard
Racialization
was I
story.
was thinking about this.
Oh,
Yep,
you
go
blacked
ahead.
out again.
We back?
I hear you. You hear me?
I do.
Okay, cool.
Boom. So racialization story. Go ahead. Sorry,
Yeah,
folks.
yeah. Yeah, so where I grew up, there were not very many black people.
Yeah.
In our elementary school and middle school, I only remember one black girl.
Dang.
Yeah. Oh no,
God.
maybe two. And I don't remember any male black students.
Oh wow.
Yeah, which is interesting. So where I grew up, it's like the rural part of San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
It's and it was like a up and coming kind of community, like in the 90s, they were just building all these houses there. And so it was kind of a
Mm-hmm.
newer community. So I guess who was mostly moving to our neighborhood was white at the time.
Yeah.
And it's about 20 minutes drive from the nearest kind of like city center. So
Yeah.
everybody who grew up where I grew up, you have to like drive to work.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to go down to the town. So anyway, so I remember the earliest I remember race is off is like hearing about racism in school, hearing about the civil rights era. Um,
Okay.
so we studied in school, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, like, slavery. We went over kind of all that stuff in school.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about segregation. And so as a little kid, I just kind of, okay, we back.
Yep, we back.
So I remember learning about the civil rights era, and I remember coming home and talking to my dad about it, and I'm like, "Did you know about all this?"
Why have you been keeping this from me, father?
I'm like, segregation that happened like in the was that happening when you were a kid? Like, did you guys have the different water fountains and stuff like that? And he said, and I don't even know if this is fully true, but he's like, "Oh no, we didn't have that in San Diego." Like, he's like, "That's like the South. Like, we didn't have that over here." And so one of my earliest things I kind of learned about race was like, okay, there is racism. It's bad, but probably most of it was in the past and most of it was in the South, and it was not
Okay.
here in California. And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting, California, when you're learning about like American history, you just don't identify with a lot of it because it all happened really far away on the other part of the country. And we weren't even a state yet. And also California is very like a self-centered place. Like California loves California and doesn't think anything else matters. It's kind of like Texas, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah. Okay.
California feels like it's its own country. And so
Yeah.
we're just like, "Oh, you guys over there, you had your civil war. You guys are ridiculous. Like we weren't a part of that. Like we weren't even
Yeah.
around yet or we were a new state. Like we were out here looking for gold. We don't know what you guys were doing." Um
Mm.
And so like for me as a kid, I think growing up, for it felt like to me that slavery, that racism, that segregation, these things all happened a long time ago in a different part of the country. It doesn't have anything to do with me. We're all good over here. Like, you guys are
Yeah.
crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So like when did it become this is sounds so weird, but like when did it become real? Because like the last guest that I had on, Kelly, she we like stopped the whole show. I don't know how this caught me by surprise. Because again, like I know the people who are coming on this show, but like she said that she did not think about being white until after college or like in college. And I was just shocked. I was like, man, if black people were afforded the opportunity to not think about their race for 20 years, like one of the things that I said talking to her was that I could go out here in Nashville. I could go outside and act like I don't know that I'm black. I will quickly be reminded at some point.
Hmm.
Something crazy will happen. Somebody will say something crazy to me, especially working in these white spaces. Like I've been noticing in the last couple of months how much I have to curate myself to go to white spaces. And so, like, I just couldn't imagine. I don't know if I go 20 minutes without thinking about being black. More like never 20 years. And so, like, when did it become a salient thing to you that there's a difference between white people and black people?
Man, I have no idea. Uh, I think, I mean, I think most the black people I ever encountered up into a certain age, I just thought we
Mm-hmm.
were the same.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I mean, maybe high school. When I went to high school, I went to a high school in a different area, and then it was a
Mm-hmm.
full range. Oh, by the way, my school growing up as well, it wasn't all white. It just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just wasn't many black people. We had a lot of Mexican people in San
Mm-hmm.
Diego, and also a lot of Native American people because we're very close to a reservation.
So
So
did you receive, like, would you say your racialization story is different for them? Like did you notice their differences, or was it just like, oh, these are just some other people who are not me? Like what was your experience with them?
we oh
Oh,
oh back.
boom.
I think as a kid, I didn't notice differences so much. I kind of just figure we're all the same.
Yeah.
But the older I got, the more differences became pronounced. And I think it wasn't probably more till high school years and it makes sense. I mean, kids are developing more who they are by that time.
Mm-hmm.
Also, where I went to high school, there was a lot more like the part of town it was closer to the city and closer to like some lower income areas. It was closer to
Mm-hmm.
areas where people grew up different than how I grew up.
Okay.
And um, so I think it was more pronounced and more clicky, and there was more like black students hanging out with black students and Mexican students hanging out with Mexican students. There
Mm.
was we always like you have crossover. So there's like a few white kids that hang out with that group, a few black kids that hang out with this group. But it was probably more like high school where I started realizing like, oh, there's kids here who like they're really into like hip hop culture. And
Mm-hmm.
where I grew up, this just hip hop wasn't a strong part of the culture. Like the 90s in my part of town, it was like we were mostly into rock music and maybe some kids were into pop.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I think there was some people were into maybe like more like the girls were into like some hip hop or pop. Some R&B was big at the time, but
Mm.
like me, like everybody I knew, we all liked rock music. You know, and so I think maybe high school is the first time I actually got around kids that was like, oh, look, the way they're dressing looks like hip hop. It doesn't
Yeah.
look like. And so I don't know. High school is probably the first time I started noticing like people actually, kids actually being more specifically a part of their culture.
Yeah.
Or feeling like there was a divide, feeling like I wouldn't
Mm.
naturally know how to communicate with you, or if I came and said hi, I feel like we're really different, and maybe it wouldn't go well. Like maybe we
Yeah.
won't relate.
Yeah. So, like, is there any significant experience, like, regardless of the age, that kind of broke you into this idea of, wow, like, there is a different experience happening in the United States for some people, very different from my own? Like, because I know you and I have had conversations in the recent years about it, but I don't know if that was like the first time for you, or like, when did you start wanting to really know more about people of color's experience?
Um, well, if I'm going to be literal about first time, I'd have to really think on it. I think I've always, on some level, been aware, but it hasn't ever been like a first priority thing in my head. You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
never been
Hmm.
the main thing I think about. I'm mostly thinking about music and my career and trying to find a girlfriend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But um, I think, you know, coming up to, before George Floyd, Ahmed Arbery, and like the events of 2016 was definitely, I don't know if it was the first time, but let's just say it was a very salient year for me. It was a very important, probably the biggest kind of opening up,
Hmm.
to me feeling like, wait a minute, I don't know about this.
Yeah. Was that like, did we have conversations around that?
Yeah. We started talking after George Floyd. Um, Not the first time we ever started talking, but we started talking about race more at that point. But
Yeah.
I could tell you my kind of story, my 2016 story, if you'd like.
Yeah, do that.
So, when Ahmed Arbery was shot,
Hmm.
I, you know, I think we've like, in the last like 10 years, especially, like from time to time, a news story pops up about young black man killed, young unarmed black man killed,
Uh-huh.
and uh, I try not to pay attention to politics because it's just such a shitstorm of of people at each other's throats, and it's just anxiety producing. But when
Yeah.
those stories pop up in your feed or whatever, they never. I didn't spend too much time thinking about them. I think they registered as, wait, is this bad? Was there racism? Is this a bad cop? And then you try to like read some things about it, and one person says one thing and another person says another thing, and it just kind of got filed away under like thing I can't do anything about
Mm,
/ I don't know the truth. I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm not sure. And just like move on.
yeah.
And like, maybe it's caused a little bit of psychological pain for a second, but then like you get a notification on your phone and you're like, oh wait, what's this new YouTube video? And like
And you just move on.
move on. But what was different about Ahmed Arbery for me was this. So right around that time, I had started doing a musical project, and I had a black friend that I reached out to and asked him if he knew any friends who could be involved. And he sent a lot of friends my way, and they were probably majority people of color.
Mhm,
And so I was in communication with all these different people of color and adding them on Instagram, making them a part of the project. It was like a big
mhm,
kind of crowdsource project thing. And then the Ahmaud Arbery murder happened, and I was newly friends with a lot more people of color on Instagram. So I saw a lot more content about it. And
mm,
a specific video that kind of really shook me was in somebody's Instagram story. They posted, I don't even know who the guy was, but he was a black man, and he was obviously in a lot of pain. And he was just talking to the camera and just talking about how he feels tired and how he
mm,
feels worn down.
mm,
And you could just sense all the pain that he was in over the Ahmaud Arbery murder, as well as the ensuing dialogue that people have about it. And what
Mhm.
was so surprising to me was how it was affecting him. It drew compassion out of me, and then it made me go like, I think the thing that came to my mind was, wait, why is this affecting him directly? Like, he doesn't know Ahmed. He doesn't live in that same part of the country, I don't think. Like, they're not friends. He didn't, you know what I mean? But it was hitting him personally. And
Mhm.
that surprised, I think I've talked to you about this. Like, that's never happened to me as a white man. I've never like heard about, if I heard about like Florida white guy got killed by a gator, like I would not feel any level of compassion for it. I mean,
Hmm.
I wouldn't stop and go like, wait, that was a white guy like me. Like, what the
Mm.
hell is up with these gators out here? Like
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
eating my
yeah.
people. Um,
Not
like
eating my people. Oh no. The
I'd be
gator agenda.
yeah. What are they up to?
What are
I'd
them gators up to?
I'd be a lot more likely to be like, that guy's not like me. He's screwing with gators. You know what
Gators.
I mean?
Ooh,
Uh,
this is interesting. Like, okay. And I mean, I know technically, like I have a lot of content about the difference between individualist cultures and collectivist cultures, and like white
yeah.
culture being an individualistic culture, which means like they don't really tie themselves to people who are not close to them. Like if I don't know them personally, and then with black culture being a collectivist culture, I see myself in other black people like regularly. It is a part of my socialization. It's a part of our socialization to see other humans deeply and to connect with them, whereas that is not a part of white people's socialization. Like, and it's sometimes frustrating to hear white people talk about learning compassion. And it's just, but I also think, again, being able to see both sides. um there are a lot of like younger white folks, and I mean maybe this would be called the white liberals, who are like, we just need to be nice to each other, we just need to be compassionate, everyone should know this. Like, I don't know a lot about white American history that promotes the learning and like sustenance of compassion. There are very few stories that I can think of from white history that were like, the white people saw the natives struggling and they had compassion on them and they learned to live together. It was like, no, white people showed up and they took what was salient to them and killed everybody else. And so, like, it makes sense that white people have to learn compassion. It doesn't seem to be promoted in a deep manner in white upbringing. Like, does that track with how you were brought up, or do you think something different?
I don't know. I think, to me, the thing that hits home more is the identification part, the part of identifying with other people, like in the collectivist way.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have compassion. I have compassion for anybody, in any kind of given situation, if I'm actually in the situation, or if I
Mm-hmm.
know them, or if I'm being told about a story. And even if you hear a story about, you know, back to gators, I heard a story about a baby that was eaten at like Disney World
Jesus.
by an alligator. Yeah.
Oh no.
And like, you have compassion for them, but like, I'm also like 2,000 miles away, don't know them at all, and it's a news story, and our whole world is just bombarded by so many news stories, and the whole news is, I love, some comedian said like, the news is just like, what's the worst thing that happened today, and local news is what's the worst thing that happened the closest to you. And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of, I think to some extent all of us have to be a little bit, or all of us are a bit desensitized to bad things, because it's just, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think is really different between black culture, as I've experienced it through you, and the culture that, you know I'm a part of, or I see, is, it goes right back to that video, is like, wait, he wasn't shot, and he's not related to him, and he doesn't know him, and they're not friends. why is this making him painfully tired? Why is this hurting
Mm-hmm.
him? And it's because it goes to, I think what I've learned is that it goes to a much larger issue. And I think you guys, um, in the Black culture identify with each other. And there's I think it all comes back to what you said of collectivism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that made me, that whole thing in 2016 is what made me think, I don't know how to explain it other than it made open my eyes to, wait, this is really hurting people
Mm.
in a way, beyond just being a news story or just being another bad thing that happened. Like there's a whole community of people that everything, each time something like this happens.
Yeah, the devil trying to block us with this Wi-Fi today, but we're gonna push through. He'll be back. Ryan will be back in just a second.
Oh,
Boom. You said that there's a whole group of people. What?
that every single time something happens, that a young unarmed black man's killed, that's going on a tally. That's like going on a cultural tally that's adding to years and years. The water
Man.
just keeps rising.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't have a good explanation, but that's kind of I'll just say that was kind of the moment that I'm like, wait a minute, is my black friend, I won't say his name, but is he who posted that? Is he experiencing what this guy's experiencing? Is he in pain because of this? Because I think previously I'd thought of it in just a more of a political way or a current events kind of way. Like, okay, this is starting
Mm-hmm.
a conversation. Something bad happened to somebody. Well, we know bad things happen to people everywhere all the time. What does this mean for the world? And then what the conversation you hear on the news is just a political conversation about it's racism or cops are racist or white people this, and then you hear another side that's like, actually no, it's this or that or whatever, and it's just this whole argument football match between people. And you watch 2 minutes of it on the news and go, goodbye. Like
Right. Like I can't make heads or tails of this. Like I'm out. Like so.
right. I've never been a sports fan. Like I'm not interested in watching two other people compete against each other for fun. Like I'd rather be in the game myself. So, but yeah, but that opened my eyes and got me thinking about, wait a minute, like maybe I could, I wouldn't say like I went into being like, here, let me be a full on ally, but like I did start, well, like at least I could repost this, and
Mhm.
reposting about the Ahmaud Arbery murder as it was kind of a first step for me, and it was a scary thing to do because I know that I have a lot of white friends that seeing me repost it would take it in a political way and would think, okay,
Mhm.
you're on this or that political side, and
Mhm.
would be offended or something like that, or might look at me weird or think, okay, you've done anyway. You've gone too liberal now by
Mhm.
reposting this, and they think in this political mindset. But from my perspective, I'm just like, wait a minute, if this is actually personally affecting the people of color who are in my circle, it's not just Ahmed Arbery who was hurt, it's actually a whole community. If me reposting this might show them like, hey, I also agree that murder is bad and this is wrong and racism is bad and I'm on your side, if that could help anybody, then I of course want to do it.
Yeah.
So
It is it is really something. Like I feel like I'm having this experience right now of and I mean, color me late to the party, but I haven't watched the news. I haven't watched the news since 2016. The last thing I saw on the news was Trump winning the election. And
I was
I've
gonna say that as a joke.
nope. It's the
Trump
last thing
won,
I
you're
saw on
like,
the news.
and I'm
And it's
out of the
like,
news.
we're not doing this. Because I knew, and black people knew, like we knew what was going to happen. We knew it. And everything we said was going to happen did happen. And so, like, I was like, well, there's no need to tune into this. Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to escape it for the next 4 years. Like, I knew with or without the news, my experience is forever changed now. And so like I don't need anybody to cover that. And so I've always had this really hard time understanding why people are so confused about racism. And one of the most recent ones in Tennessee is critical race theory. Like, everyone's like, oh my god, critical race theory, we've got to get it out of our schools. Like, I've always struggled to understand why people are confused, but it's because I don't watch the news. I have a white conservative friend who I went to visit, I think, over the summer, and we are such different people, but we are also, like, he's literally one of my best friends. And, we find a way to hold these things in tension and still care for each other. And so one of the things that he knows that I would not understand what the news cycle looks like. So we went to his house and he goes, all right, Remington, I'm going to do an experiment with you. I'm going to make you watch 10 minutes of CNN, and then I'm going to make you watch 10 minutes of Fox News. I sat in front of the TV like this for 20 minutes. I said, and like, everything was so over exaggerated. It sounded like a militarization. It sounded like a brainwashing. I was like, what are you saying, and why are you saying it in such a, what you perceive to be like, well, that's said and done. Water's wet. No way around it. We breathe oxygen. No way around it. And I had just never seen anything like that before. And I was like, oh, this is why everybody's so mad. This is why everybody's arguing all the time. This is why America feels like a dumpster fire. And so, like, it was just shocking to me. And I feel like since having that moment, and it's both sides. And like, that was one thing that he kept saying to me. He's like, now, Remington, I'm very conservative. I watch Fox News, but I'm also not stupid. So, like, I know when they're like saying these things, like, they're not telling the truth. They're just putting it through this lens. And he goes, do both sets of these news channels not sound crazy to you? I said, absolutely. I said, they're both nuts. Like, it just doesn't, none of this sounds real. And so it's just very strange. And it helped me to see what battle I'm really fighting. It's not that I'm fighting like racist against non-racist. Da, da, da. It's like this, I feel like I'm fighting the battle of nuance right now. It's like no one is 100% right. Nothing is all true. Something I say, Ryan and I are both Christians. One thing that I say about the Bible, when people be like, well, it says in the Bible, blah, 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 blah. Do you know everything that it says in the Bible, it says it right now? Like, even if you're doing the opposite, even if you're thinking about doing it next week, everything that the Bible says, it says it right now. It does not become salient just when you bring it up. So, like, you saying, well, it says in the Bible that there's no da 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 da. That is not a reason to make a law. The Bible says a lot of things, like, and so I just think that people are always looking for this finishing blow. They're always looking for this thing that sticks in the ground and cannot be moved. And I just don't think that exists. Like, even as somebody who believes in, the thing of Christianity is Jesus died on the cross for all of our sins. Yes, he did, but somebody somewhere doesn't believe that. And that's also fine. And I don't think we in the United States have the capacity to deal with that. I don't think we have the emotional intelligence. I don't think we have the mental health ability to deal with things that are outside of our control and our perspective. Because even I heard you say in the beginning of your story where your mom would say this about your dad and your dad would say this about your mom. You somehow, somewhere, develop the social emotional intelligence to still hold these two people in tension and make your own decisions. And it seems to me like people want a savior right now. They just want somebody to tell me what to do, tell me what's the right thing. And I hear that a lot from white people who are trying to be allies. Do I repost it or do I not? Do I put up the black square or do I use the hashtag? Do I wish you happy Juneteenth or do I go to a protest? You got to have some kind of self awareness and autonomy to be an ally. And so, like, I really appreciate the story you just told where something came to you and you acknowledge that you were having an experience with that video that you were seeing on your timeline. And then you did the internal work to figure out what your external action was. You didn't just come to somebody and say, what should I do? How should I do it? You figured out the way for Ryan. And I think, like, to be honest, I think it's very anti white to figure out for yourself. Like, I've worked with, I went to Vanderbilt. I've worked with a lot of white people, live with a lot of white people. And there seems to be this cultural piece that white people are at their best when they're doing what the person with the most power has told them to do. If you're checking the box, if you're completing the task, if you're doing it exactly how it was told to do, white people find pride in that. Just tell me how to do it and I'll do it exactly how you say. And I think one of the things that's tearing America apart right now is white people's desire and need to be told exactly what to do. I think a person who is always looking for that is the perfect candidate to be militarized and brainwashed. And so it's just like there's so much to be addressed here. And it's not just about CNN versus Fox News. It's not just about black versus white. Like, it's deep. We are fighting a deep issue right now. A lot of deep issues, really.
Yeah. Yeah, to say the least. Yeah. Should I dive in on any of those things?
Go for it. Whatever you feel, go for it. And I think you froze.
Oh, we're back again.
Boom. Yeah, go for whatever it is you want to go for.
Jeez, what do I want to go for? I think as far as people just wanting to do what they're told or that kind of thing, I think you've also had a specific experience in the kind of Vanderbilt community. When I think about Vanderbilt students, I've got 6 of them live upstairs from me. I don't really interact with them much, but when I think about Vanderbilt and I have to constantly be reminded that they exist, I think of Vanderbilt as an extremely privileged group of people in general. With that, unless somebody came in through a scholarship or something, the average person's coming in from a really wealthy background. Man, I have met the biggest idiots upstairs. They're just like doofus college students that don't know how to do life and are, really hard for me to deal with. And then I found out one of them a few months ago. I was out back, like doing some work in the yard, and one of the Vanderbilt students and his dad came out. It was like they were like graduation, so the parents were here. And I'm like, oh, so what are you doing after school? And he's like, oh, I got my degree in neurosurgery. Yeah. And I'm like, what in the hell? This guy's gonna be a neurosurgeon? I'm like, this guy who's partying all night and just doesn't know how to take out the trash. Is gonna be working on brains. And I think they are coming from a background they grew up around wealthy parents that have big expectations for the big things that their kids should do. You're going to have this or that professional career. And then they come to Vanderbilt and their parents are spending God knows how much, several $100,000 for them to get an education. And I don't know, I'm saying, I guess my starting point is, I think you in college, you encountered a certain kind of white person that's maybe a little extra in that regard than, because Vanderbilt's a pretty specific culture. But that being said, I do think there's truth to what you're saying about white culture in general being more of like a tick the boxes, follow the rules kind of culture. And that's something I notice when I'm I've noticed with people of color, but especially black people,
Mhm.
that there just seems to be a lot more free form. And I don't know what it's like to grow up black and why that happens, but like it seems like, I mean, one thing you just notice is like it seems like on average most black people are more free to dance, for instance,
Mhm.
than white
Mhm.
people. Secondly, uh a lot of black musicians that I encounter are phenomenal in a way that is harder to come by in white musicians, specifically with rhythm, with a rhythm
Mhm.
section. That
Mhm.
it's and what it comes down to is feel. It's all feel is this hard thing to describe in music where somebody plays something and it just doesn't feel right, but what they played was basically right. And you're like,
Mhm.
how do I tell you to do it better? Because it's not that you did anything wrong, but the feel wasn't in it. And the feel,
Yeah.
I think on a scientific level, comes down to just little bits of pushing and pulling the beat from one thing. You know, it's the difference between p, p, ka, p, 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 ka, p, and like p, p, ka, p, 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 ka, p, p. Like the second one has a
Yeah.
little bit more feel to it, but they're
Yeah.
almost identical.
Yeah.
And so there's something in like black culture where people feel free to dance and to move. You know, you hear a lot of things growing up like, well, white people, we just don't have rhythm. But I was a
Uh-huh.
drummer, so I'm like, I know that's not true. I have rhythm. What are you talking about? But still, I don't necessarily feel free to just let loose and dance. I mean, when I go to a wedding, I like to dance. I think it's fun, but there's
Yeah.
got to be a lot of other people that are doing it too. And I got
Yeah.
to just kind of like copy them and I'm too afraid of looking like a fool.
Yeah.
Um, and and so I think there's something in, maybe you could speak to this, but just like something in black culture, a freedom to like. I was talking to a white friend who teaches a lot of students of color. She teaches music, and she was saying that like that in the black culture, there's just a lot more like these are just human things, like dancing and music. These are just things that we just do. It's a human activity. You don't just
Mhm.
have to, you don't only do it when you're good. And she said a lot of her young white students, they'll be like 5 or 6 and they'll be like, I'm not good at this, so I can't do it. I'm not good at
Mhm.
music, so I don't do music. And she's like,
Mhm.
that culture of you can't do it until you're good at it.
Yeah.
We're all here to sit and watch the people who are really good. So if you're randomly talented at 6, that kid can go on and do music. But if you're not good at 6 or 7 or 8, then by 9 you're like, I'm not good at music. I don't know. I just don't have it. But
Yeah.
but for some reason in the black culture, so I'm like, these are just human activities. We're just being human, doing our thing. And the thing is that you're never good at anything that you start when you first start it. Nobody's
Yeah.
ever good, but like if you don't know anything that I'm good at today, I didn't know I wasn't good at first and I just kept doing it, and
Yeah.
I was a kid and I hit the drums and I went to and I'm like, I'm doing it, and it wasn't any good, but like I was self-deluded and I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm like, how am I playing drums? I don't know how to play drums. No one ever showed me before, but I can do this. Like,
Yeah.
what? Wow. And that kind of ignorance in the beginning gets you to keep playing. And then eventually you are really good. You actually are
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just talked a bunch of things, but does any of
No,
that hit for you?
yeah, I the thing that resonated with me is the idea that when you talk about the free form, like the way that I talk about it in my work is that white culture is a rule bound culture, whereas black culture is a relationship bound culture. So I took drum lessons for 2 years, 3 years, something like that. Took them from a white man named Jeremy. Didn't let me tell the story. I ain't learned shit. Like I was just going in there and he putting up this piece of paper. He want me to play out the essential elements book. And I'm just like, this whack. But every Sunday I'm at church and I'm watching my cousin play the drums. And then after church, I'm going up there trying to replicate what he was doing. And then he comes along, or another drummer from a different church comes along, like, and they're like, okay, do it like this. And so there's a relationship piece. And I think the fact that it happens offhand. When I was going to Jeremy from 2 to 2:30 in the music studio, and and we're gonna do tut tut tat tut 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 tat, then he's gonna go tut 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 tat. I'm like, this is too structured. There's too many rules. Just show me what you want me to do and let me get there. And so when you talk about that push and pull, I think the way that Black people interact with each other is more of a, I'm going to give you the basics and then we'll say, put your stank on it, put some funk on it. It may be a dance that somebody made like this, but how are you? What's your version? What's your extra little you put in there? And so it's not
that
about
this
the
just
rules.
that is so much freedom to be able to be like, okay, well, I can do my version.
Yeah, and like
whereas if I have to do the right thing, I don't know if I'm doing it right. If I'm not doing it right, I'm doing it wrong. If I'm doing it wrong, then I'm doing it bad. And if I'm doing it bad, I look stupid.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to try.
And so like, yeah, we don't want, one of the things that I hate when people copy me. I don't want you to do what I'm doing. I want you to do what you do. You could have the foundations, you could have the principles of what I'm doing, but don't do what I'm doing. You stepping on my swag. I went into myself and gave this an extra look. Like, you got to do the work too. You got to do your thing, and I will help you do your thing. I'll help you find your thing, but we're not finna just sit here and I'm gonna give you an A because you do exactly what Johnny did, and then Bradley gets an A because he did exactly what Susie did. No, like, who are you? Don't give me this manufactured thing. Like, so much of the stuff we already have is manufactured. I think that's why TikTok is so big. Everybody, it doesn't matter if we're all doing the same challenge, we're putting our stank on it. And like, it's also why Black people are 13% of the population, 100% of the culture. We can do anything that somebody else already did, and because we put ourselves in it, it's just better. I agree with your friend. A human activity. Humans are drawn to humanity. Even the most uptight white people that I know, they love the fact that they don't know how I'm coming today. Like, when I go to certain schools and I've just got on my clothes that I be wearing, they be like, dang, how you go from the Cardi B shirt to the Kiss shirt to the Outcast shirt, and then one day you come in dressed like a lumberjack, and then one day you come in and you're in a three-piece suit. And I'm like, because all those things represent me. There's no rules. I'm not rule bound. I'm relationship bound. And in those cases, the relationship is to myself. If I'm feeling Gene Simmons rock out punk type of day, I'm throwing on the Kiss shirt. And if I want Cardi B energy, then I'm bringing the WAP shirt out. And so like, I'm in relationship with myself, and I'm letting that govern the way I show up in the world versus just going by the rules that are presented to me. And, also I said to somebody else, like, if I followed the rules of society as a Black person, I'd be dead or really sad. Like, those are the only two options. The rules of American society are kind of trash. Like, I don't even think white people like the rules of America. They just do them because it's a part of their culture. But I think resistance, free form, innovation, I think it's a survival technique of people of color, because this country ain't made for us. So like, I'm not interested in the rules. I'm not interested in how things have always been done. This never served me. So why am I checking for the rules, So,
yeah, I know.
and and you get it. Like, and I think like in your music, not that you're off the wall, but you're different. Like, people come to you when they want something they can't get from somebody else. And that's what Ryan brings, At least that's been my understanding of how you do music.
Well, I hope so. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can relate to that in a different way. I can't relate to being a person of color in America, but I can relate to being a Californian musician in Nashville. That, the rules of this city. When I first came here, I tried to do it the way you're supposed to do it. Like, I went and I got a job answering the phone at the studio. That's where you're supposed to begin. And
Mm-hmm.
I was really careful about what I post on social media and what I say to kind of make sure it wasn't something that was going to piss off the people who are in power, the people that are um, that you know, the more established music industry people in Nashville. And I was trying to conduct myself, like figure out what is this community like, how do they act, what do you do? But just over time,
Mm-hmm.
there's a component of the traditional Nashville way and country music and how it's created that is just so antithetical to how I think about music. And it's there's a the music industry in general is like this. On the big side of it, on the side that makes a lot of money, it's it's about making a lot of money. So they're not looking for unpredictability. They're looking for predictability. And
Mm.
Nashville's more this way than I think like LA, but still it's true all everywhere that they're looking for who's an artist who will sell and how do we reliably create a product that we know will be good. And so there's a lot of there's so many things that go into that, down to like how they test songs for radio and who they decide to promote and who they decide to put their money behind. And at the end of the day, they're trying to find a good, it's just something that's going to be reliable. You know what I mean? Like if they could keep putting out Britney Spears songs forever and keep making the same level of money that they were making in the mid or late 90s with her, they would just keep doing that. The only
Yeah.
reason they move on is because people move on. People get bored or want a new thing, and so they move on to a new thing. But at the end of the day, the music industry is driven by the people who have the dollars to actually promote an artist to break them are interested in a proven and reliable product.
Yeah.
And the only reason there's any innovation is because people want innovation and people want something new and get bored of the old thing. But
Yeah.
anyway, coming here and just and hearing about how, you know, the people, so I'm kind of at the bottom trying to like, okay, I'm going to slowly work my way up, but then I kind of see what's going on or hear stories about how people think about producing music. I'm like, well, I don't even really want to be a part of that,
Mm.
because there's a whole thing in Nashville, like traditionally they have like a musicians union, and here are the musicians, and you pay them this many dollars. This is their standard rate. And they all come in and they do a 3-hour session. And in 3 hours, you can do, you know, anywhere from 1 to 10 songs, depending on how they want to do it. And these
Okay.
musicians are just so good that they could actually pull that off. But I'm like,
Okay.
man, if we're going to spend 3 hours and let's say more conservatively, 2 songs, we're going to do 2 songs in 3 hours. Like nobody got to spend that much time being creative.
Yeah.
You just had to do what was good, and it was probably a little original because you're probably a talented musician, but um, they're just doing like, okay, we want a pop country song, so make it kind of, we're gonna kind of make it sound like Taylor Swift, or kind of make it sound like whoever else. The band Perry and Lady Antebellum is gonna be somewhere in there. That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
And so you play things that sound like those things,
Yeah.
and it's uh what I like to do is very different. What I like to do when I can do it is I like to work with somebody on a project for months, where we work on the best is when you do a full album and do 10 to 12 songs, because then you have really a wide canvas to paint with. And you can, if you're doing one song, you want that song to be like a hit song. You want it to be like
Mm.
you want it to be like the radio song or the pop song or the song that's going to catch on. But when you have 12 songs, then you can do a ballad, or you can do a slow song, you can do a song that you know is never going to be like a big hit, but there's still a place in the world for that kind of music, and that kind of music's important
Right.
too and does a different emotion, but it's just not going to be the radio song. So I
I.
love to work on an album where we can do all these different things. And
Mhm.
I like for it to take, you know, 6 months, where we spend all day. I did this with a guy last week or 2 weeks ago, where we spent one full day just doing his one vocal for one song. And
Mhm.
we were doing a Christmas song. We are doing O Come Emmanuel, but they're more like
Mhm.
an indie rock band.
Mhm.
And so the song is like, O come, Emmanuel, ba-da-da-da, you know, like that's how
Yeah.
people have classically sung it, but that doesn't work for an indie rock band. And so
Yeah.
we spent all day working on it, because we're going back and forth on, okay, what if we go, oh come Emmanuel. Like, what if you do that? If you don't do Emmanuel, you know, and like do that. Okay, that was kind of cool. Try it again like this. Try it again like that. Let's try changing the melody. Let's take out a bunch of those melismas, those runs that are more part of classical music, and see how we can port this over to be your style. But we
See, this
spent
sound
7
black.
hours doing that.
This sound black right there. The number of times I done spent finding this one thing and being like, okay, I'm calling my team together to say, how do we flip it? I ain't ever calling them together to say, how do we take this exact thing and make it just like that and put it out? It's like, we're going to spend this time on how do we put our stank on it. And so, like, yeah, that's why I fool with you, Ryan. See, that's why we keep you on the team. So yeah, we are overtime. Me and Ryan just been over here shooting a breeze. I got other things to do today, but this has been wonderful. We don't really have time for Q&A at the moment, but we will maybe we'll be able to have Ryan back on if people have questions. I'm probably gonna end up uploading this to YouTube hopefully tomorrow, so people will be able to watch. You'll be able to share it. I'm also like working on switching over to doing Facebook videos natively. Like, I want all of my YouTube content to come to Facebook. So I'll let you know when it's up, Ryan. Thank you, everybody who dropped in. I know people couldn't stay the whole time. Folks that have jobs, they're at work. You know, it'd be like that sometimes. I guess people be working the traditional 9 to 5. No shade. You know, sometimes you got to do your job. I get it. But thank you for coming through, Ryan. Tell people where they can find you, where they can follow you.
Probably my main thing these days is Instagram at Ryan Poole Music. And then Facebook, I'm just Ryan Poole. I think I have Ryan E. Poole / Ryan E. Poole. Early adopter. That's my main thing. I'm not on Twitter. Mostly Instagram at Ryan Poole Music.
Okay. Cool. And y'all always know where to find me. Instagram Remington_RHC. Also, Take a Seat Race Talks on YouTube. And I will be back in 2 weeks. I think my next, let me not even sit up here and lie. I don't remember who my next guest is. Actually, I think it's my friend Josh Hangen, who is an educator. And me and Josh are gonna have some stories for y'all asses. We done seen a lot. But thank you, Ryan, for being with us today. And
absolutely, thanks for having me.
I'm sure I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.